Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome my friends on YouTube who have joined this webinar. And today is a very special day for us. It's our 27th, hosting for our Thursday leadership series, which I know has become extremely insightful. It's on the calendar of many of my colleagues and friends, so thank you. So I'll now start the webinar and start welcoming people who have registered for the webinar into the webinar room. So, today is a very special day for us because we have a very special guest today with us, Anjali Bansal. Anjali, I first met because my dear friend Anjali Raina, who was those days, who was working with Citibank, she said, you may get a call from somebody called Anjali Bansal because I am being considered to work for Harvard Business School in India. And it is Anjali Bansal who will check references with you. And since I was a mentor to Anjali Raina, I said I would be delighted to do so. That's how I discovered Anjali Bansal. And the very process of the way she asked questions and the warmth and the awareness and the deep listening that she did, I was convinced that Anjali Bansal is a very special person. I've enjoyed listening to Anjali and learning about her journey, which has been a very unique journey. And so, right from an engineer to then becoming, later on, finding her way to Columbia, then joining McKinsey, then doing all the amazing things that she has done, including being invited by the government for some key roles that she has played. So those are all amazing things. And, she will talk more about that. So Anjali, thanks a lot for joining this Thursday series.
Anil, thank you so much for having me here with you all. It is indeed, I am honored, and it is my privilege and pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Anjali, one of the questions that I always like to ask, life is just, when you look back at life, it's a series of special moments. And at my level, when I look at my 66 years now, a few moments just really stand out for me as very special. So I'd like to ask you, in your life's journey so far, what are those few moments that stand out for you as those special moments in which there was so much of happiness and joy you experienced, you and all the people who mattered to you, something really special happened. So could you tell us about a few of those moments that are so special in your own life?
Wonderful question to start with, because it makes you think about all the happy times in life. And I think, I do believe we all carry our happiness in ourselves. And it's how you look at life. So I have a lot of happy moments every day. So if I had to think about some 2 or 3 special moments, it's really in the context of what makes me me. And my sort of concentric circles are my family, my work, and then the ecosystem and the community we live in. So I think there are special moments with each of them. I think it's very hard to, as there are professional special moments and there are personal special moments. Nothing can beat the arrival of your children. So if I had to think back, and it's fraught with anxiety, when your first time you're having children and so on, it's fraught with anxiety, and then the sheer joy and the continuing joy of growing with one's children is, I think, very special. On the work front, I've been very fortunate. I've had some amazing times with colleagues at McKinsey, terrific memories of both learning experiences, sort of pulling all-nighters, but the team spirit, the camaraderie when you're pulling all-nighters. I think I can remember many all-nighters like that. Moving to India, settling into a new office, being very warmly welcomed by my colleagues here. My first entrepreneurial journey when I left McKinsey and had the opportunity to start the Spencer Stuart India office. Again, very, very special moment. At that time, each milestone that came along, starting our Women on Corporate Boards program, which was the first of its kind, and then seeing the incredibly warm, responsive collaboration from sort of the absolute industry standard bearers on governance and leaders. Again, very special moment. And then more recently, I would say starting Awana, which is my new enterprise. It's again very collaborative venture with a bunch of like-minded friends and colleagues. And some of the recent work we have done with the government on creating the livelihood platform called Unnati. So I am replete with special moments.
How
I can
very
go on.
blessed, how very blessed you are, Anjali. But tell me, out of all these 7 or 8 moments that you have described, if you were to pick one or two in which you and the people with you, which means the teams that you were with, you managed to do something which which when you look back and you say, oh, wow, that was special, something we did together. So what would those moments be?
I would say actually very recently. Let me pick something very recent and very topical.
Sure.
So COVID happened, lockdown happened. We were fortunately quite well prepared, and in our work, you can very quickly go remote. So we all went to remote working. And then we started doing sort of, weekly meetings all together as we used to do in the office. Then we said, let's take it to thrice a week. And then people started getting tired. There was fatigue in the early days. There was anxiety, health, what will happen to economy, and so on. And I think one of the very special moments we had is when we said, let's end every meeting with let's go around the room and say, I am grateful for. So I think just that burst of positivity of thinking about, yes, the world is a difficult, dangerous place right now, lots of uncertainty, but something good has happened to us also. So what am I grateful for? And the things that came out, people were grateful to their parents, to their children, to their neighbor, their colleague, the help. Sometimes, one person actually said, I'm grateful to my bhajiwala, which was great. So you start including people in your life. I would say that was a very recent special moment, and I think it bonded us as a team and created positivity. Similarly, again, very recently, what we have pulled off, I think, in a very collaborative way, again, in the context of COVID, is the coming together of policy, government, large industry, and the startup entrepreneurial ecosystem, and saying, let's just band together and create collaborative solutions. And we are seeing some very interesting things emerge where there are wartime efforts that are resulting in lasting peacetime solutions. Unnati is one of them. There is a healthcare bridge that has got created. There are several other digital rails that, again, collaborative effort between industry and government that are getting created. So just a group of people. We are now a team of about 70 volunteers working on this.
Wow, that's really, really very special. Tell me, let me just turn back to the moment when you chose to now become an entrepreneur. As you said earlier, you were like an intrapreneur. But the moment you said, I'm going to take the plunge, I'm going to put my money, my life, my future at stake. Can you just describe what was that moment and what made you take the plunge?
Honestly, it was somewhat organic. It evolved. It just made sense. And I would say a lot of things in my journey, at least, have happened that way. They haven't been formulaic that, okay, I've done this, now I must do that, then I must do that. It's a combination of, I have a very dear friend who I'm sure you know as well, who she often tells me, you know what, don't overthink things. The universe acts. Now, yes, I know the universe acts, but there is some plan also. So I had left TPG at that time. So I'd really enjoyed investing. I learned a lot at TPG. I was a global partner with them and very grateful to have that opportunity. Then I got pulled into sort of chairing Dena Bank when at a time it was under severe stress. The second PCA had happened, the prompt corrective action by RBI, and it needed some tending. There was not an MD. So to suddenly be parachuted in as non-exec chairman of a very stressed public sector bank, we can talk about that a little bit as well. So after all of that, there was a emerging realization over the last few years that a lot of problems in our country or in countries like ours of livelihood, of inclusion, of formalization, and ultimately economic value creation and opportunity creation will have to come through a combination of what is happening in innovation. So using innovative models, technology, but scaling it. So scaled, and like many of us here, like you, Anil, we've all grown up in the sort of the corporate ecosystem. So the value that scale creates, and not just shareholder value, but creates employment, for example. It creates lots of sort of consumer surplus, and it creates revenue for the country. So scaled up organizations create a very different kind of value. So we said, what can we do to work with startups? And I had been investing for a long time and mentoring a number of startups. So we said, how do we bring it all together? So that is how actually Awana came to be. So to spot opportunities, to invest, to have a seat at the table as an investor, to drive to economic returns, but also to second and third order returns.
How nice. Let's talk about the portfolio of your investments. And when you look at an opportunity, I know there is all this about, discounted cash flow, net present value, terminal value of a business, and all the spreadsheet analysis that it teaches. But there is also some intuitive thing about looking at the passion and energy of the entrepreneur, looking at their vision, looking at something. So could you describe a few things to some of the young people on this platform today, who some of them, I'm sure, aspire to be entrepreneurs at one day? What do you specially look for, which is something really special in people? What do you look for before you invest?
So we look at a few things. We look at what problem are you trying to solve? So, the entrepreneurial journey is a very difficult journey. So while today it is, yes, I will do a startup, but why are you doing a startup, right? What is the purpose behind it? Both personal purpose as well as, is there a large enough problem that you're seeking to solve? So what's the problem that we're seeking to solve? Is it big enough? Because if it's not big enough, then you are creating the next nice mousetrap, but it's a small opportunity. The thing in the entrepreneur, the X factor is, what is their personal sense of passion and purpose? So one is that. Two is, are they equipped with the skills? And nobody is born ready. We all learn. So the skills work both ways. Do they have adequate grounding to be able to do basic work? But do they also have the humility and the learning agility to learn all the time? I find the best entrepreneurs at any age, they are absolute sponges. They want to absorb as much as they can. And then they have exceptional processing capability to process it and use it in their own startup or their own enterprise. So I look for passion, purpose, integrity. Integrity is a non-negotiable. And it's not just about sort of fraud integrity, but how do they work with people? Are they true to their work? Are they true to their purpose? And then do they have the humility and learning agility to grow?
Oh, very nice. Now I'm going to ask you something which is going to surprise you, which is to say, you have done these special things, and obviously you are pretty self-aware of what you are good at and things that you want to do differently in the future. So how do you apply what you just said to yourself? What are the strengths that are visible to you, which you value, right, which tell you that you're going to be a great entrepreneur yourself?
Actually, I don't know, right? So I think that is, I start from a place of, I don't have all the answers. So every day has to be a learning journey. So for me, a good complete day, and that's where I found I get my joy from, is if I have learned and if I have contributed in some shape or form. So I have a strong sort of need. So I'm selfish that way. I want to learn all the time from people, from situations, from information, and then apply it in a way which creates outcomes that are beyond self. So every day is a contribution opportunity also.
Fantastic. Now tell me, some of these qualities you bring, depending upon whether you follow Brian Weiss and his past lives and, many masters and that kind of context. People believe, those who believe in past lives and rebirth, they believe you carry some of these tendencies from your past lives into this life, which give you some special passion and energy. But irrespective of that, even if you don't believe that there is any past life, so that is the gift of nature. But there is also the gift of nurture, which is about the people in your life who have made a big difference. So when you look at your own upbringing and the things that you learned from people who mattered in your life, what were some of the early aspects that you learned and you emulated and acquired as a part of who you are as a person, and where did you get those from?
Oh, definitely from my parents. So everything that I have good in me as a person comes from my parents. and my, if you will, my natal family in that sense. And then some of it acquired from my new family that you get when you have a spouse and a partner. But the orientation towards service, sort of extreme approach to sort of work ethic in some ways, and saying that you need to do, not expect, but actually first give before expecting, and actually don't expect. So my father's mantra always is karmanya vadhikara vaste, which is, you do your karma as a good person. Don't expect too much to come out of it, then take whatever you get. So I think that was a good way to grow up. Again, sort of strong focus on integrity and authenticity. You cannot be somebody else. You have to be you. So if you're not authentic to yourself, how can you be true to others?
So tell us about what he did and what did you observe about what he did besides what he shared?
Oh, this was all observation. I mean, I really do think that with the children, and I practice this with my children, I hope better as well, is it's monkey see, monkey do. It's not what you say, it's what you do. And I observed this with my parents growing up, their commitment to the community, their commitment to the family, their commitment to their work, to learning. So we were a very learning-rich home. There was sort of lots of books and magazines and conversations, and there were no conversations that were sort of off limits because you were a child. So we had discussions on all sorts of things, and we continue to do. We were encouraged to have a point of view, encouraged to have an opinion, which might actually be a dissenting opinion.
How very nice. Now, from that life and that kind of a blessing, then you found yourself getting to do an engineering degree. And later on, you switched over and went to Columbia. Can you tell us why an engineering degree and why then a different life after that?
Well, in our country, at least in those days, now there are more options. In those days, if you're half decent at math and science, then you should get either engineering or medicine. I was pretty clear about medicine. So, and then I had a fascination for space. So I grew up a complete sort of space snake, reading Carl Sagan and Isaac Asimov and stories from NASA and so on. So that's why I actually went into engineering. And I spent some time in a lab at ISRO as well as part of my sort of final year. And therein came the realization that while I'm fascinated and I love science, and it's great training, it gives you analytical bent and good training, it's not what I want to do for the rest of my life. And thence from a very structured engineering program to Columbia, again, fortunate to have got a scholarship there. Studied a mix of business, finance, policy, international relations. And then on to McKinsey, which continued to be a very diverse, plural set of learnings.
My daughter also works for McKinsey, as I was sharing, and I have worked a lot with the McKinsey folks on a number of joint projects and assignments. The firm, as we call it, always has a few things about how it helps you to push your boundaries and also helps you to become a better version of yourself. Can you describe the growth that took place in you as a person and as a professional, both in McKinsey? What was that about?
So the firm it's a truly unique place. It's only after you leave the firm and you go into the wider world that you realize it's such a unique and special place. And it's also unique in the sense that it's probably one of the few companies anywhere in the world where the alums still care very deeply about the firm and still feel a sense of bonding there. But that comes from the investment that the firm makes in its people. So both the professional and personal learning. So there's of course a lot of structured learning, but the best kind of learning is the apprenticeship model that McKinsey still has, or at least had when I was there. And you work in teams. So you're learning from your peers, your colleagues, your seniors. There is no limit to what you can do. You're encouraged to, it used to be called make your own McKinsey. So if you have a great idea and you go to somebody and say, I had this idea, should we not do this? And they'll say, yeah, by all means, go ahead, do it. So everything is a leadership opportunity, which you realize very quickly is very clever. And it's a tool I use a lot with my young colleagues now. I trick them into it. They'll come with an idea and I'll say, that's a great opportunity, go for it. But in the process, you learn. You learn to take risks, and people invest in you and give you good sort of mentoring there. And you work very, very hard. but then it is accelerated learning.
Yeah. Very good. Because I've often...
I think the other thing the firm gives, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm just going to continue
Yeah.
on that, is
Yeah.
work for a larger purpose.
Yeah.
It is not just a client project, but there's a purpose, there's a larger purpose. And I find this in, even now when I look at a lot of folks coming out of McKinsey and having spent a few years there, is a larger sense of purpose of what can you do to better the world.
How very nice. Let me ask you another question. You know, some of us are fortunate to be born in the right families, we get the right upbringing, we get the right quality of education, and we get the right opportunities. But life also has a strange ways of showing up in ways which are completely unplanned. You want something and something else happens to you. And growing up, I heard a song which said, life is what happens to you when you're planning something else, right? And sometimes all your intentions, no matter if you work very hard, but you fail. Or all of a sudden something happens in your life which is a low moment in your life, a sense of inadequacy, failure, low moment. Have there been any such difficult moments in your life? And if so, what have those been and how did you confront those and what did you learn out of those?
Wow. I would say several, none that stands out as such particularly, but low moments when you're stuck and you don't know how to move forward. And there have been situations like that. There have been difficult situations with clients. There have been difficult situations with some of our companies, or including some of the boards I'm on when the company is stuck in a certain place. Personally, I think moving to India at that time, landing in a new geography, I hadn't really worked here before, and getting to terms with just living and working here, not by no means a dark moment. In fact, a very nice, light moment, but unfamiliar territory. Starting Awana, again, unfamiliar territory from scratch. So I wouldn't say particularly dark moments with, I think each of them have been, I've found at each of these inflection points or crossroads, people who have been very generous with their time and with their advice and their thoughts. And I tend to do that. I have good friends and mentors. I'm very, very grateful for.
Okay. If there was a decision that you made in the past, which in hindsight you felt this was a significant decision, you ought to have made that decision differently, or you ought to have done something differently. So any other moment which you can describe as the biggest learning moment of your life so far?
I had so many learning moments. Let me pick a couple. I think I will say when I was asked to chair Dena Bank, it started with extreme anxiety, unfamiliar, again, very unfamiliar situation, public sector bank, very stressed, lots of sort of focus on how it will all work out. And then realizing later that one didn't actually need to have all that anxiety and have a bit more sort of sense of confidence that, yeah, it can be done. I spoke to a few people, and it's a story for another day maybe. And they all said, you've got the skills, you've got the experience, you can do this. And I think, again, going back to what is more fundamental, what is the intent behind it? The intent was to actually serve the country. And in some ways, it was a call to serve. So as a call to serve, you stand up and you say, we'll try our best and see what happens. And fortunately, we were able to get an outcome, working collaboratively with whether it is, the government, and learning very quickly my colleagues in the bank as well.
Very
and
good.
Working through people.
That would be, of course, that's something you seem to enjoy very much. Now, another thing I want to ask you that, this crisis which has come completely unexpected, and nobody has any idea how the future is going to unfold. Every day you hear people, oh, vaccine is coming at this time. My Japanese friends say, I serve on the board of Shizenken University in Japan. And this university people, they have a lot of significant companies like pharma companies, the top pharma companies associated. They said in Japan, we are planning that we have to live with COVID till 2022. And all our business projections are based on that, and we have to learn to do that. On the other hand, there are people who are highly optimistic. Come summer of 21, this problem will start reducing. So all kinds of interesting things. And then there are some others who say this will never go. So all kinds of people speculate about different things. But in this crisis, with this, the mother of VUCA, the VUCA was in some sense an intellectual world till COVID happened. So what is your guidance to a lot of young people today, many of whom are feeling extremely anxious, many of whom are finding it difficult to just be on the digital platform for so many months and are missing out on that, warmth of being with people? So how do you read this, and what are the insights you would like to share to especially our young people on this platform?
So I actually don't know whether it's 2 years or 1 year or next year or next month. We know it is not next month. Or is this going to be a way of life? There are theories around all of them. There are also theories that maybe even a vaccine may not solve all of this, because after all, it is RNA-based virus. It can mutate and come back in a different form. The most optimistic scenario I have heard is that it becomes like the flu. We'll all get it. We'll have treatment protocols. We'll get treated. So maybe, that's the most optimistic scenario, really. For young people, I think the young they're blessed with more resilience and with a long runway ahead. And particularly where the disease is concerned, a lot more sort of resistance to it and ability to cope, is to stay positive, actually, to stay positive, stay optimistic. And this is a good time to say, how do I solve not just for myself, but I solve for others? Do a good deed every day. Doing something good for somebody else, even if it is doing it remotely or digitally, do it for a colleague, do it for a friend, send a nice message. It is the greatest stress buster that you can imagine. So that's one suggestion. The other is invest in yourselves and skill building. So while, yes, some sectors have been decimated, and work as we know it perhaps will never be the same again, it has also led to a lot more efficiency and effectiveness. It may have reduced the learning opportunities. So I worry about the learning opportunities for our young professionals, because they don't have the benefit of being in the office, being together, and getting the apprenticing in some ways. But seek your learning opportunities with your managers, with your colleagues, even if it is virtual, and invest in building new skills. We are hearing consistently across organizations now that there's anxiety, there's stress. People don't know where to draw the line. Work has become sort of 24/7 because it is virtual. So even if it means, working actively, don't be a recipient, but work actively with your company, your teams, and say, let us define a protocol where we will all take time off. So take your Sundays off for sure. Take your other time. I don't always practice what I preach, but find joy every day is the only way to deal with it.
Very nice. One last question before I turn it to the audience, and questions are already beginning to bubble up. The most important aspect, and this question you would have been asked many times. I serve on the advisory board of Schneider, and many years back, Schneider understood that in terms of diversity, both women in senior leadership positions, as well as having all kinds of nationalities in the global leadership team, that Schneider needed to become a more diverse company. And Jean-Pascal Tricoire, the CEO, and all the other members of the leadership team, they consciously chose something. And within a matter of a few years, there was a very significant impact of that, because they went about doing that. What's your guidance for those companies that want to not only talk about diversity and inclusion, but really make it happen in tangible ways? Are there things that you would recommend to them to follow as leaders?
There are many. I will start with get on and do it. We'll find 100 reasons why it is hard, why it can't be done, and so on. So rather than think about all the reasons why you cannot do it, get on and do it. I'll give you another example. I've learned this, that Cummins, for example, hardcore engineering company, at one point they kept saying, we need to have more women, need to have more women. Eventually the board came down and said, no, you need to have at least 50% women in your entering GET class, graduate engineer trainee. And so, of course, you had the usual sort of thing around, but how do we find all these women from mechanical engineering? They said, we don't care, you go find them. And they did. So, so there's a hardware element and there's a software element to this. If an organization, first of all, has to decide at the highest level, there has to be top-down sponsorship. There have to be KRAs assigned. G actually had a KRA for its senior management, that they were not allowed to actually evaluate candidates for a new position until they had, I'm forgetting what it was, 30 to 40% women on the list. And similarly, so policies, structures, women-friendly policies, all of that is the hardware. Hardware is the easier part. The tougher part is the software. It's the mindset and the cultures and the attitudes of embracing diversity. And then we talk about women and gender diversity, but diversity is of all sorts. It's embracing the other different point of view, different way of working, different way of engaging. Women may not, your young women colleagues may not be as available to go out socially and, I don't know, do Sunday morning golf and so on and so forth. But there are other ways you can engage them. So learning to work with different type of people. Could be gender, could be religion, could be ethnicity, could be sexual orientation.
Great. Dr. Ajay Agarwal is asking a question. What is that one large unmet need that keeps you up at night?
For me, or?
Yeah, I mean, unmet need that you are focusing on, not just your personal need, but something that keeps you awake.
So unmet need, okay. I would say it is, with all our sort of erudition and our technology and our innovation ecosystem in India, how do we bring everybody along? So inclusive growth is one thing I think about a lot. And I'm very heartened actually that in some ways this COVID and lockdown has accelerated the digital inclusion of our, in some ways, bottom of the pyramid, your everyday workers, your everyday small merchants, your kirana, bhajiwala, etc., as well as the MSME segment. So.
Nice. Riyanka Shah, who's one of our guests in this webinar, he's asking a question. What was the idea behind Avaana Capital and what makes it different from other similar firms?
So, well, the idea was to create a platform which is not just investing, but plus. So it really harnesses the energy of the innovation entrepreneurial ecosystem in India. And we have a very vibrant ecosystem of that nature now. And combines it with the scale that large corporates provide. So, our worlds really at Awana, we live in sort of 4 worlds: the startup innovation world, large corporates, policy, and then impact. So take the innovation, apply scaling to it, and then be able to achieve large scaled outcomes on many dimensions, including livelihood, including empowerment, gender inclusion. Awana is a 2x gender smart platform. So we have a stated objective and a stated goal to support not just women entrepreneurs, but creating more gender awareness in all our portfolio companies. So that was the idea behind Awana. It's equity, it's debt, and it's leveraging our entire ecosystem to support not just the companies we invest in, but others as well. So we run something called the Expert Circle and Avaana Connect programs. We bring a number of young fellows in who work on policy initiatives with us, or go and do interesting things with some of our portfolio companies. So it's a fairly holistic approach, and I think that's what is different.
My cousin Beena Singh, whom I'm very proud of, who was India's first mechanical engineer from IIT, and her daughter, you might know her, Malika Singh from Harvard Business School. Her husband Pawan is in that Bain Capital. You might know them.
Oh yes, I know Malika. Yes.
Yeah. So this is Malika's mom. Malika's mom, and Malika also has a brother who's also an entrepreneur like you, who's a Princeton graduate. So in any case, Beena Singh is asking this question. What do you think India needs to do to kickstart the economy?
The economy is running. It's running a little bit slower. what I'm hearing is though that there are pockets of sort of actually enhanced activity, particularly in the rural agri space. Um, I think we are going through a period of transition in some ways where it's the old way, and this is independent of COVID. In some ways, I think COVID has helped. I mentioned this earlier, but the acceleration of digital adoption, because it's like diversity. We were saying, what can they do? Either just get on and do it. And it's not an option. If you make it non-optional, it tends to happen. And because of the lockdown and because you could not do a lot of things with cash or physically, the adoption of digital has become a necessity. And so that is happening. There are infrastructural rails that are getting built on sort of much like UPI did. What UPI did for payments, there are things that are getting built in health, in education, in agri. So I'm actually quite hopeful that with some of this infrastructure in place, we will find a new cycle of growth that is more innovation led and more inclusive as well. I mean, there are segments which are suffering more, perhaps, manufacturing, and we've talked about it. These are all lots of economists out there. I'm not the expert on this, but I have a view. But any company that has embraced kind of innovation and digital, I think, is coming out of this. A short answer is economy is still running. It's not quite stopped. I wouldn't say kickstart.
I mean, most of the companies I'm talking to are talking about they're 85 to 90% there now.
Yes,
that's the conversation they're saying. And, so it's quite remarkable that because there is that good old resilience in the Indian spirit. And I think we are going to bounce back. That I'm convinced also. Yeah. Great. Now, my dear friend Nausher Khurodi, who used to be the managing director of Voltas, and a dear friend.
Hello, Nausher. Yes. I'm on the board of Voltas. And
yes, that's right. So he's asking, how is your experience of serving on the Voltas board?
It is fantastic. I enjoy it completely. It's a very engaged, collaborative, cohesive board, very constructive. Noel Tata now chairs it. And I shout out to the Voltas team here. They have done extremely well. They continue to grow. They continue to deliver great shareholder returns and continue to be on the cutting edge of innovation. It's the highest, I'm very proud to say, the highest market share in air conditioning in India. And they have maintained that share by a long, long sort of lead over the next company, which I won't name.
Wonderful. Roland Sullivan, who is one of the global sort of organizational development leaders, and he's based in North America. He's asking a question about what are your own thoughts about climate change and the various opportunities you get to support those who are trying to be part of the solution on climate change? What are your views about this?
So again, climate change is, to me, in the same bucket as diversity and innovation and digitization. Climate change is non-optional. Companies and individuals and communities, we all have to get very conscious and focused on climate change, and more broadly, environment and sustainability. And companies can handle this in many different ways, reducing waste, reducing your carbon footprint. The reality is the bulk of our power still is thermal. So we will continue to have that. And that's globally, not just in India. But for climate change, we look at things. We just invested in a very interesting global climate community called Terra.do. So please look it up. Shout out to Anshuman Bapna and the Terra.do team based out of Palo Alto. So they're actually a distributed team across Hawaii, Palo Alto, and India that are creating the first climate school in the world. So terra.to. I think as companies, as individuals, India actually as a culture, if we go back to when we were growing up, we always had a recycling culture. We were always told, no, you can't throw away things. You need to reuse them. You need to use them more. You don't need to buy new all the time. So I think a little bit of shift away from this very, in some ways, very insistent consumerism that we seem to have embraced. I'm not a Luddite by any means. I also enjoy my consumerism. But yeah, I think achieving the balance. And we are seeing this. We are seeing this with unseasonable weather patterns, unanticipated rainfall at the wrong time, fires in California. I think it's nature and the earth telling us we have disturbed the balance. We need to bring it back.
Tell me, you have a young son who's a sophomore in Stanford, and your face and whole presence was, being lit up when you talked about your wonderful son. Tell me, these young people whom you and I both know have some really good quality answers, and they also are very passionate about making a difference. What do you hear through his eyes about issues like climate change?
So I did a little informal, so I like data. So I did a little informal, so I would say a focus group. There was a bunch of young kids at home. My younger son is a high schooler, but a very active, very, very engaged, very aware high schooler. So I was talking to, I think, from the age of 16 to 20. And I said, what is top of mind for all of you? So the first answer was different for different people. Then I said, okay, what's next? Unanimously, it was environment and sustainability. So that to me, and thank you to Roland for asking that question, I think is a very positive sign. Both my children have an interest in how do you not just do your work, but also help to improve the world.
Very nice.
So, and I see this across the board. I see this with young people who are, they're passionate, they've got purpose. And you ask me, what can young people do? I think find a sense of purpose, and that will take you through your darkest moments.
Absolutely, absolutely. Incidentally, that is the essence of what I personally teach to in my school and also other schools in different parts of the world, which is the course on self-leadership. And its highlight is really discovering your purpose. So great. Anmol Singh is asking a question. He's saying, what's your advice on sustainability of a business as an entrepreneur during this COVID scenario? My business was not sustainable and I had to shut it down. What's your advice for young entrepreneurs like us that we should keep in mind for the future?
Three things, and I'm sorry to hear it was shut down. I know it has been very difficult, and first and foremost, I think at the beginning of this COVID period, it was all about sort of conserve the cash. We don't know how long it will last. Businesses that had enough cash or have sustainable sort of profitable models will continue even if there is lower growth. But if you're dependent on equity infusion or it's a burn-led growth, then I think it has been difficult times. So the first thing was just conserve cash, focus on surviving, because if you survive, there will be another day, and then you can grow and thrive again. The second thing is, if you are past, if you have handled your survival issue, then really spend the time, invest this time in listening to your customer. So the voice of the customer, spend time with the team and innovate new products. So my company is, in fact, one of my companies that makes bicycles has, they had sort of zero sales in the first 2 months of lockdown, or close to zero. And they have come back resoundingly where they're beating their March 21 expectation in November. So I think there are different ways, and they have innovated. They've launched sort of e-bikes. They have launched a direct channel, digital channel. So that's the second thing: innovate, listen to the voice of the customer. And three is find ways to work more frugally on a continuing basis. Then don't go back to the old habits.
You know, this particularly has been difficult because a lot of people, when they have had to take tough calls, I know of companies where senior management reduced their compensation, but also then encouraged the others to reduce their compensation. But some of the people did not see it that way, that they said once our compensation is reduced, they chose to leave the company, even though people later on their salaries were restored. So what does that tell you about this whole thing about having a bit more patience and applying yourself for the whole rather than looking at it from your only individual point of view and doing things like that? Is there any particular thing about what you want to tell people about building the whole rather than just being focused on themselves?
Yeah. I think you said it so well, Anil. It is about the whole. And if you are solving only for yourself, so there is a difference between optimizing and maximizing. So if you try and maximize for self, yeah, maybe you get a better short-term outcome, maybe. But if you maximize for the system and in that process optimize for yourself, then I think those are more sustainable, lasting solutions and eventually lead to better outcomes for the individual and the self also.
Wonderful. Well, very nice. That's
so not to maximize for self.
Yeah. Very nice. Very nice. Rami Mukhija, whom you know, who was on the board of Larsen and Toubro, and he's part of the series.
Right.
So he's saying when he became your colleague on 9th March 2015. And Rami, incidentally, 9th March is my wedding anniversary. So anyway, that's the anyway, you joined, Anjali became your colleague, you said. And he really likes your answers, which are very relevant for young people. But he's saying, what is your view about helping youngsters to also understand the need to increase their own immunity level? How can they increase their immunity level in more sense than one?
It's build internal strength. And Mr. Mukhija, it's such a pleasure to interact like this with him. He's again one of those people we used to rely on and we miss very much on the board now. I think his expertise is absolutely distinctive and much appreciated. But just like you would build resistance against bacteria or a virus, which is, you eat well, you exercise, you sleep well, so you invest in yourself. And similarly, resistance against adversity comes from creating that inner resilience and strength. And I go back to finding who you are, a sense of authenticity, working with purpose, and doing good things. You define what good means to you, but do good things for others.
Soumya Kalra, who's a member of the Student Council of Soil and one of our bright young students. So she's asking this question. At any point in time in life, Anjali, did you ever feel that probably you were not in the right space? If so, what did you do about it?
Not at a macro level, Soumya. I have seldom found myself in just the wrong place at a macro level. You may often find yourself, I'm in the wrong, not in the right set of people, I'm not in the right environment. Then, you can't change other people. Either you adapt. So I have learned to adapt myself to a new environment if I felt it was not completely effective, or then exit the environment. But I am not as ambitious as to try and change other people. I certainly try and change the environment and influence the culture there. But I think our effectiveness is, and this is, I think we need to have, at least I feel that one needs to have the humility to know that my effectiveness or success is not just me. It is also a function of the people and the environment that I am in. And so finding environments and people that are conducive to your effectiveness, I think are important.
Yogesh Andle, co-founder of Soil and also founder of Nuclear Software and those kinds of companies. He says you have steered a stressed bank in its most difficult times. And when huge amount of depositors' funds were struck and large amount of difficult sort of whatever happened there, and people everyday media talks about fraud and scams and all kinds of things. What do you think needs to be done to bring back the health of these banks, especially the public sector banks? What needs to be done?
First of all, I want to say how inspiring his own journey has been to so many entrepreneurs by creating this iconic company called Nucleus. Very successful. What can be done? I think some of the things are already happening. In some ways, kind of the consolidation of balance sheets, the change in the way banking and underwriting and risk evaluation and monitoring is being done by banks. It's not an easy problem to solve. There was a mandate for growth that banks also followed. I think we are seeing the consolidation in the public sector banking system, which will also, I think, bring a little bit more of sort of strategic focus on what each of these banks does. When there was a time when we needed nationalized banks, and actually Indian industry has been built by nationalized banks before the private sector banks came along. So a lot of the industrial investment over the last 50, 60 years. So we need to acknowledge that and then also embrace modern banking.
Okay. Pulkit Nagpal, who is from our new campus in Manasar, the School of Business Design, which focuses on human-centered innovation. He wants to take you back to your ISRO time, the short tenure you had with ISRO. And he said that, when you look at ISRO and look at, the kind of things it needs to do. So although it's ranked 5th in the world in terms of similar organization, but what can it do to become even more, I don't know if you have any current understanding of this organization, but how can ISRO become not just top 5, but the leader?
Pulkit, I would like to say that I think it's on its way. We talk about lean and frugal design, engineering. I think ISRO has demonstrated all of that, frugal and lean. We've managed to put things in space and on various planets and the moon and so on, which at a fraction of the cost. I think ISRO is well on its way. I feel a huge sense of pride. I was there for a very brief while, but I feel just such a sense of pride in what is being done, not just ISRO, but by our country, by India, on this front.
Right. Mahesh Limay is asking a question. He says, India is considered to be a software powerhouse. Every business needs digitalization in the present situation. But why do you think the big innovation in this area is not coming out of India? What can we do to become, the country which creates these major organizations like Google, Facebook, and these kind of things?
So India has not yet had the kind of software product innovation, such as the Google, Facebooks, and so on. But I think it's not. It's a combination of factors. One is the size of the market itself. So Google, Facebook, etc., have tapped into a much larger market in the US. So where we are sitting today in India, I'm not sure I would fully agree that we are not seeing enough innovation. I think we are seeing tremendous innovation here. But it's in a different way. It's not necessarily tech product companies, although I think you will see in the next 5 years, literally in the next 5 years, if not then 10, product companies coming out of India. There are companies that are starting in India, moving quickly to the US, but they're India started companies. There's Postman, there's Mindtickle, there's product companies that are doing really well. So I think there is scope. We are at, in some ways, sort of the second horizon of technology innovation in India, going from service to product.
Right. Ashish Kakre is asking a question: where India stands today, what is your assessment of skilled workforce as compared to the rest of the world or the other growing economies? How strong are we in building the skills that we require for all our dreams and aspirations?
So I think work to be done. There's some good sort of constructive initiatives underway, but a lot of work to be done on this. Clearly, the big need with our young population is to not just create jobs, but to create skilled people who can earn their livelihoods, either through jobs or through entrepreneurship. And skilling is not just about college degrees, as we all know. I think at least the people I'm sure in this group will know. It's not about college degrees, but it's useful vocational skills. It is employability, skill gap bridging. So I think there's work to be done on that. And I go back to the previous question on why is India not seeing innovation? I think India is seeing so much innovation. We are seeing these digital bridges get built in health. So if we can take, doctors are starting to consult now on WhatsApp, which would have never happened even in January of this year. So I think Indians are very adaptive. We are changing very quickly. So I think we will see innovation from very unexpected places.
So there's a follow-up question that could be asked, that your time in Niti Aayog, and you did something significant, and how was that experience of working with Niti Aayog and the government, and what insight did you get about that process and that system?
It's still ongoing, actually. Unnati is ongoing. It's been absolutely fantastic. I think the Niti Aayog brings together, it serves a very useful purpose, actually, and it creates a lot of energy and collaborative energy across the central government and states on the one hand, as well as various ministries, and then the private sector. So the ability to bring all these forces together is quite unique in Niti. Needless to say, it comes from very strong leadership. CEO Niti Aayog is an absolutely inspirational leader in his way. In fact, I would recommend if we can get him for one of these sessions. So it's been a fantastic, fantastic journey.
Great. Raga is asking a question. He's saying, how to keep yourself motivated to work for long hours, because apparently that's the context he is facing, and he wants some guidance on how he can source the stamina and the well-being to keep going for long hours.
I would say, again, three things. See what you enjoy in your work. If you like your work, work doesn't feel like work. Now, you may not like all your work, but if you can even get to, I like 80% of what I do, I think that's a good place to be. So find joy in the work you do, and you'll find it gives you energy rather than taking away energy. That's one. Two is absolutely, particularly during this time, there is such a risk of all of us turning into couch potatoes sitting at home in one chair, is walk around, get out, get some exercise. So invest in whether it is exercise, meditation, yoga, something that takes you out of the work zone. And three is, again, absolutely spend time with your loved ones. It could be your pet, it could be your family, it could be friends, but do that. I think that's important.
When you dream, Anjali, about yourself and you look back at your life that is going to unfold, what is that one thing that personally you feel deeply in love with, that aspect that personally matters the most to you at this stage of your life?
And then looking back or looking forward?
Looking forward.
I'm going to misquote this because I don't remember it fully. But I'd like to, at the end, finish quite worn and beaten up, but knowing that one has lived a full, rich life, made a difference, a positive difference in the lives of a few, if not many. And yeah.
Great. If there is just one piece you want to say at the last sort of offering that you are moved to share today in this forum, what is that one thing you would like to share which you have not shared so far, which could be useful to the people who are listening to you?
So since this is School of Leadership and Management, I will speak a little bit about the context of business. And all of us as people who are involved in the business of business, if you will, it is time we start thinking about the broader purpose of the enterprise and going beyond profit is important. Profit is essential. If you don't have profit, you cannot grow, you cannot innovate, you cannot create jobs. So profit is essential. But going beyond profit and looking at not just shareholders, but employees and stakeholders and communities and supply chains and your vendors. So more holistic, really. And thinking about the needs of, and I keep going back to this, I think if you think about the needs of others, your needs will get met.
Great.
Businesses need to think about that as well.
Very nice.
More responsible.
Anjali, what a gift to receive to be in your presence today. Here are the things that I learned from you, and these words will stay with all of us for a long time. Maximize the whole and optimize for yourself. I'm reminded of an incident. I was facilitating a conference for the global leadership team of Motorola, and we took them to Ananda. And we invited an unusual spiritual teacher from Rishikesh. It's called Swami Bill. This was the CEO from New York, who at the age of 50 gave up his wealth to pursue inner wealth. And he came to the Shivananda ashram and spent 30 years here. So we invited him to join us for the evening, and somebody asked him this question: why is it we are struggling to really make a difference in the matter of innovation? Motorola was going through some challenges. Here is what he said. He said, all of us want to be the center of the universe rather than being one with the universe. And, and then he just smiled and kept quiet. I thought that was the most profound answer we had heard the whole evening and in the whole conference. So you today reminded me of the wisdom of Swami Bill, that you optimize for yourself but you serve the whole. When you serve the well-being of all, you discover your own well-being in the process. The second thing that you said, that life is not just something that suddenly dawns on you, that there is one eureka moment and things happen. You said, I love the word you said. You said this was an organic process. It was not just one day you got this flash of brilliance that I'm going to be an entrepreneur. But this was a organic process. It was evolving. And when you enable things to evolve, then they happen through you. Rather than you're saying, I want to do this and this is what I want to do, then your ego very often gets in the way. But when you let it evolve, I think wonderful things happen. You also said to everybody something very nice. You said to people that, if you are fearful, if you are anxious, if you have low energy or whatever, the best way for you to source the stamina, the enthusiasm is do something small of serving others. Because compassion is the key to mindfulness. If you can be more compassionate every day, you can be more resilient, you can be more joyful. And what a nice circle you had in your team of everyone ending the meeting by saying, what is it that they are most grateful for? Thanks a lot, Anjali, for being today here with us. And, thank you for who you are and the work that you do.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, everybody. And look forward to next week when we welcome Rajmohan Gandhi ji, the great the grandson of Mahatma Gandhi and a wonderful person himself. So look forward for all of you to join us next week. Thank you and good night, everybody. And good morning to you, Roland. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. And all the